People see the sky as a symbol of freedom and airplanes as triumphs of human engineering. Safe above the clouds, we believe nothing can touch us. But I learned how fragile that illusion really is. My name is Juliane Kepke. I was just 17 when a violent thunderstorm tore my plane apart, sending me falling 2 miles into the Amazon rainforest. What followed was 11 days alone in one of the world's most unforgiving jungles, where survival meant surrendering to nature, not fighting it. This is the story of how I survived the impossible. It was Christmas Eve, 1971. The air in Lima, Peru, was heavy with the festive anticipation of the holidays. My mother and I were boarding Lanza Flight 508, eager to return to Panguana, the biological research station deep in the Amazon basin where my father was waiting for us. Both of my parents were renowned zoologists, and I had grown up with a deep, profound respect for the jungle. I knew its secrets, its dangers, and its intricate balance. But as we boarded the Lockheed Electra aircraft, I was just a teenager looking forward to Christmas. I sat in a window seat in the back row, beside my mother. The flight was only supposed to be an hour long. As we took off, the sky was clear, but as we approached the Andes and crossed over into the airspace above the massive, sprawling Amazon rainforest, the horizon turned a bruised, violent purple. We were flying directly into a massive thunderstorm. The turbulence started as a slight shudder, but quickly escalated into a violent mechanical thrashing. Luggage spilled from the overhead bins, gifts wrapped in bright paper tumbled down the aisles, and the festive mood evaporated into sheer, suffocating panic. People began to scream. I looked out the window and saw pitch-black clouds illuminated by jagged, relentless flashes of lightning. And then, a massive bolt of lightning struck the right wing. I watched in horror as the fuel tank ignited. A blinding flash of white light consumed my vision. Over the roaring chaos of the cabin, my mother, usually a woman of unbreakable calm, grabbed my hand and said quietly, "That is the end. It's all over." Those were the last words I ever heard her speak. The next few seconds stretched into a lifetime. The aircraft didn't just crash, it tore itself apart midair. The fuselage snapped, ripping open like a tin can under immense pressure. Suddenly, the roaring noise of the engines and the screaming of the passengers vanished, replaced by the deafening, howling rush of sub-zero wind. I was no longer inside an airplane. I was outside, strapped to my seat in a 3-seat bench, plummeting through the open air. I was falling from 10,000 feet, 2 miles above the earth. The sensation was not like falling. It was like being caught in a violent, spinning centrifuge. The seat spun rapidly, the cold air tearing at my face, stealing the breath from my lungs. I saw the dense canopy of the Amazon rainforest rushing up toward me like a vast green ocean. A fall from that altitude is an absolute death sentence. The human body is not meant to survive terminal velocity. But as I spun, the row of seats acted like a maple seed, twirling and catching the air, slowing my descent just enough. And then, the dense canopy of the jungle, the interwoven branches, and thick lianas of the ancient trees caught me. They broke my fall like a net of green fingers, absorbing the catastrophic impact before dropping me the final few feet to the dark, wet jungle floor. Then, everything went black. When I finally opened my eyes, the world was spinning in a nauseating blur. It was morning. The heavy, relentless rain of the rainforest was hitting my face. I was lying under the bench of seats. I tried to move, and a wave of agonizing pain shot through my upper body. My right collarbone was snapped. I had a deep, gaping gash on my right arm and another on my leg. My right eye was swollen completely shut from the pressure of the fall. And a severe concussion left me dizzy and violently sick. I had lost my glasses in the wind, leaving my vision in a soft green haze, and I had lost one of my sandals. I was wearing only a sleeveless mini dress, wholly unprepared for the environment around me. The silence was the first thing that truly terrified me. Where was the plane? Where were the other passengers? Where was my mother? I crawled out from under the metal seat, my body screaming in protest, and I began to call out her name. The only answer I received was the croak of frogs and the buzz of a billion insects. I was entirely, fundamentally alone in an expanse of over 2 million square miles of uncharted jungle. Panic is the easiest emotion to surrender to, but panic in the Amazon is a fast track to death. Because of my parents, I was not a stranger to this environment. I knew that the jungle was not evil, nor was it malicious. It was simply indifferent. It did not care if I was a terrified 17-year-old girl or a fallen leaf. If I wanted to live, I had to play by its rules. I remembered a critical lesson my father had burned into my mind. If you are ever lost in the jungle, you must find water. Find a trickle, follow it to a stream. Follow the stream to a creek, follow the creek to a river. Wherever there is a large river, there are people. Water was the only compass that mattered. On my hands and knees, fighting the nausea of my concussion, I began to search. I found a small bag of candy in the debris, my only source of food, and a small, trickling spring. I took a drink of the muddy water, gripped my one remaining sandal to protect my bare foot from venomous snakes and spiders, and began to walk. The first few days were a blur of unimaginable physical and psychological torture. The Amazon is a sensory overload. The heat is oppressive, a suffocating blanket of humidity that makes it hard to draw a full breath. The canopy overhead is so thick that the sun barely reaches the floor, leaving the jungle in a perpetual, eerie twilight. But the worst part was the insects. Without insect repellent, my exposed skin became an absolute feast for mosquitoes, flies, and stinging ants. Every step required immense effort. My broken collarbone ground together with every movement, sending fresh waves of nausea through my system. I walked through the shallow water of the growing stream because the banks were completely impassable, choked with dense, thorny undergrowth. But walking in the water brought its own terrors. I had to constantly poke the mud ahead of me with a stick to check for stingrays, whose barbed tails could deliver a paralyzing, agonizing toxin. I knew the waters were shared by electric eels, piranhas, and caimans. I saw the caiman's reptilian eyes floating just above the surface, watching me. But I knew that if I didn't provoke them, they would likely leave me alone. Fear became my constant companion, but I refused to let it paralyze me. I sucked on a single piece of candy a day, rationing the meager sugar just to keep my body moving. By the fourth day, I heard the sound I had been praying for, the hum of rescue planes circling high above the canopy. I screamed. I waved my arms. I tried to find a clearing to make myself visible. But the canopy of the Amazon is an impenetrable roof. From the air, the jungle looks like a solid sea of broccoli. They couldn't see me, and they couldn't see the wreckage. Over the next 2 days, the sound of the engines grew fainter, until finally they disappeared completely. The crushing realization settled over me like a physical weight. They had given up. They assumed everyone was dead. I was officially a ghost walking among the trees. The psychological toll of that realization was far heavier than my broken bones. When nobody is coming to save you, you have to dig into a reservoir of strength you didn't even know existed. I had to be my own savior. By the 7th day, my body began to fail. I had run out of candy. Starvation began to shut down my muscles. I was drinking gallons of river water just to fill my empty stomach, but the lack of nutrients was making me delirious. My mind began to play tricks on me. I saw roofs of houses that turned out to be fallen tree trunks. I heard human voices that were just the calls of monkeys. But the most horrific development was happening inside my own body. The deep gash on my right arm had become infected, and worse, a botfly had laid its eggs in the open wound. I looked down one morning and saw a hole in my flesh, and inside, dozens of maggots were writhing, eating me alive from the inside out. The horror of feeling parasites moving beneath your skin is a psychological violation that defies description. I tried to pick them out with a small twig, but they burrowed deeper into my tissue to escape the light. I remembered another horrifying lesson from my parents' research. If the maggots were not removed, they would eventually eat their way into my bloodstream, causing sepsis or requiring amputation. But I had no medicine, no fire, no tools. I was decaying while I was still breathing. Days 8 and 9 were an agonizing descent into near total exhaustion. The stream had finally widened into a larger river, the Shibuya. I could no longer walk. I spent most of my time floating on my back in the current, letting the water carry me. It was a dangerous gamble, exposing myself to the predators of the deep river, but I simply had no energy left to stand. The torrential rain poured down every afternoon, chilling me to the bone, followed by blistering heat that baked the exposed skin on my face and arms. I was a bruised, battered, half-blind creature, clinging to life by the thinnest, most fragile thread. I began to think about giving up. I thought about how easy it would be to just let the water pull me under, to close my eyes and let the pain stop. The jungle demands a toll, and I felt I had finally paid it in full. But every time the darkness threatened to take me, the memory of my father pulled me back. I was his only child. If I died, he would have lost his entire world in one day. I couldn't let him be alone. Love, stronger than starvation, stronger than pain, forced me to keep my head above the water. On the 10th day, floating in a state of semi-consciousness, I bumped into something hard. I opened my swollen eye and looked. It was a boat, a small wooden boat moored to the bank of the river. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my mind instantly rejected it. It's a hallucination, I told myself, just like the houses, just like the voices. I reached out and touched the wood. It was real. I dragged my broken, exhausted body out of the water and crawled up the muddy bank. There, I found a small, crude hut with a roof made of palm leaves. It was empty, but inside, there was an outboard motor and a small barrel of gasoline. When I saw the gasoline, a spark of pure survival instinct lit up in my brain. I remembered my father treating a dog at our research station that had been infested with botfly maggots. He had used kerosene. I dragged myself to the barrel, unscrewed the cap, and found a small plastic tube. I dipped the tube into the toxic fuel, brought it to my right arm, and poured the raw gasoline directly into my open, gaping wound. The pain was absolute white-hot agony. It felt like holding a match to my exposed nerves. I screamed into the empty jungle, tears mixing with the rain on my face. But it worked. The gasoline choked the maggots, forcing them to the surface seeking air. Over the next hour, I pulled 35 writhing maggots out of my flesh with my bare fingers. I slept in the hut that night on the hard wooden floor. The next morning, I heard the sound of voices. Real voices. 3 Peruvian lumberjacks emerged from the jungle, walking toward the hut. When they saw me, they stopped dead in their tracks. I must have looked like a demon from the local mythology, a bruised, starved, half-naked water spirit with a bloodshot eye and an arm covered in dried blood and gasoline. They were terrified. I spoke to them in Spanish, telling them I was a passenger from the Lanza flight that had crashed over a week ago. Their eyes widened in pure disbelief. Everyone knew about the crash. Everyone knew there were no survivors. But they took me in. They cleaned my wounds, gave me food, and transported me down the river by boat to a local hospital. I was the sole survivor of Lanza Flight 508. 91 people died in the crash, including my mother, whose body was found days later. I survived a 2-mile fall from the sky. I survived 11 days in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, with broken bones, no food, and no tools. When people ask me how I did it, they expect a story of conquest. They expect me to say I fought the jungle and won. But that is the arrogance of the modern world. You do not conquer the jungle. You survive it by its grace and by understanding your place within it. The wilderness is not a monster to be defeated. It is an indifferent force of nature. If you panic, if you fight it, it will consume you. But if you listen to it, if you respect its rules and strip away the illusion that you are in control, you might just find your way back out. We are fragile creatures, suspended between the sky and the earth, and survival is merely the act of refusing to let the thread snap.